Hi, this is VA Virginia Shank, and welcome to Vocal Journeys. This is a vocal artist interview series where voicing yourself ignites passion for the planet. I'm so pleased to have with me this morning Noirin Ní Riain from Ireland. Noreen was born on the west coast of Ireland in County Cork, began singing lessons at the tender age of 7, studied music at the University College of Cork, specializing in religious music. She's a sean-nos singer and writer, with spiritual songs being especially her inspiration. Sinead O'Connor, who Noreen collaborated with, or actually I should say Sinead collaborated with Noreen in 2004, said, "Noreen is my biggest influence in heroine in music." Noreen grew up near Glenstal Abbey and still lives near Glenstal Abbey and was greatly influenced by the monks in Gregorian Chant, and as far as I know is the only woman who was invited to sing Gregorian Chant with the monks and is quite renowned for it. There are recordings that exist as well. She, in 1989, was able to introduce and sing for His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama, at an international peace gathering in Costa Rica. She's a theologian, a musicologist, and of course a recording artist, an author of Listen with the Ear of the Heart and Theosophy, a theology of listening, among other books. In 2017, she went on to be ordained as an interfaith minister in London and now has embarked upon a new role as spiritual counselor and celebrant of rituals, blessings, and sacred ceremonies. Noreen weaves a magic spell of transformation and transfiguration around all who choose to and are privileged to attend, and I know that's true. Welcome, Noreen. It's so good to see you again.
Gur míle mágad bhí agus chaim Har bheith áthasach chun bheith live leatsa agus de éistóirí go léir agus de chantóirí go léir. Agus mar a deirmid in Weiling, cas árán sin mar a deirmid nóair a thugamid cuire dóing do aine chun árán ará, cas árán. Agus sin chun árán a chur I le, a chur chun beocht a chur árán agus na históí freisin. Agus have you very puzzled? Did you think I was going to be there?
Oh, I love it. I love it because all sounds are fantastic to me, and I know whatever you said was the most beautiful thing on the planet.
I wasn't giving out at all or being anyway negative. But when I get excited, I really have to talk in Irish. And of course, I'm so excited, VA, to invite you into this little room that you were here with your band of singing warriors.
Yes, I have been there. Blessedly so. That's right. That's right.
So it's a great privilege for me to invite you in again, and of course your listeners and your singers.
Absolutely.
And particularly at this time, which is we're on the eve, tomorrow is the eve of Imbolc, or the feast of Brigid, our great patron saint, who has overshadowed Patrick, actually. A lot of people only know Patrick. But really, if truth were told, there's so much more known about Brigid, and she visits every house, but more about that later on. But it is a great privilege to be with you. And I've seen some of your series already and loved them. So it's an honor for me to be here.
Yes, well, so glad to have you. And to let our listeners know, I met Noreen, had the chance to meet her two sons, Owen and Mihal, who are wonderful singers as well, and of course who have sung with you and recorded. Met them through our friends at Gladdening Light in Florida, and I had the chance to perform with them as well. And they spoke about you, and the way that they spoke about you, I went, I need to meet their mother. The mother has this tradition, and that, of course, speaks for a wonderful mother. And so I came to Ireland to meet you, and of course, we hit it off, and I'm just so blessedly so. And so when I take singers on my singing journey retreats and have brought a few to Ireland. I know that place is important to me. Tradition is important. And it's not my tradition. I'm a visitor in your blessed land. And that it's important to me to call upon people of that land to show us the way. And so it's been wonderful that you have been that for us and been a guest, collaborator on those trips. And we hope to return soon. So in this time where we're not traveling as much, some folks are, but just in this vocal journey series, that too is a journey, and of all things vocal that inspire us, I wanted to touch in with you today, and particularly because we are at the time of Imbolc and Saint Brigid, and she informs us of so much. Yeah. So maybe let's back up a little bit in that when I think of music or singing and the vocal journey, it's that inner spirit inside. My tradition, of course, I studied Western classical music too, but mostly of jazz, which also comes from the soul and the spirit needing to express. I mean, we could go on about that, but that search for meaning and soul. And when I think of speak about your own trajectory with that, even as a little person, how did that come about for you?
Well, I was a very troubled child. If this is a bad map of Ireland, I was brought up actually not in Cork, but in Limerick, which is a little bit up here. And so, and this is where you're speaking to. I'm just 5 miles from where I was brought up. But I was always singing. My parents would say I sang way before, this happens with lots of singers, before I spoke. And singing was my best friend. I didn't have other friends. And so I started experimenting a lot, not just with my voice, but with listening.
Right.
And that's when I started, exploring the art of listening. Now, unconsciously, of course, because I was just a small girl. But when I came on later to know, why am I so obsessed with spiritual song, first of all, and with listening, a certain kind of listening, which, of course, this time of Imbolc opens up for us, but we'll talk about that later on. But so I suppose it was a mixed blessing, as indeed this COVID has been a mixed blessing for us, hasn't it? That we are so much in awe and grateful to all those people on the front lines who've been working away for us over the past 2 years. But then look at the gift, via of us communicating,
Absolutely.
becoming zombies, which we're doing every single day now. But being able to speak this, we probably would never have done. You probably might never have done these podcasts were it not for COVID.
Right.
And so there are the blessings too that we're given, the opportunity, because in my tradition, or certainly in my way of belief, in that that I believe everything, we're being guided. We're being guided by what we call the Holy Spirit, that even in the midst of our journey now, there is a third listening ear. And in fact, I want to call in that, because I had forgotten to do that, which is to ignite a candle, a light of inspiration, belonging, and friendship between us now, between you and I, VA, but also extending a rainbow of light out to all our listeners. And of course, in the Irish tradition, you see, we believe that when each one of us was born, a candle was ignited in heaven.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and that continues to burn for as long as until we are called back. Sometimes it's a small candle, as we might know when people are called back very early, and sometimes then a longer one. And so when we say in Ireland, when we say somebody has died, we'd never say, Mary is dead. We would always say, Tá a chuinneal mochta rih bhreacha an lé, which means that her candle is extinguished before the dawning of day. And of course, that's the resurrection into new life, new beginnings. So we light our candle of friendship there between you all.
Beautiful, beautiful. So tell us then about, I don't know, I think we better kind of like dive into our purpose today, because you and I could go on for hours, as you well know. Um, tell us about then the light of Imbolc. And for those who don't know about Imbolc, a lot of our listeners may have heard about the winter solstice and the spring equinox, but
Yeah.
yeah, could you
And
tell
then
us more?
I will, because when you mentioned the winter solstice and spring equinox, we have 4 major Celtic feasts, and they are what we call cross-quarter days. So they're in between the solstice and equinox. So we'll say coming up tomorrow evening, we're right in now between the summer solstice or the autumn equinox and the winter solstice. And so that is the 31st of October. Oh no, I'm sorry, come around. That's our first major feast is that one. It's called Samhain, and that's in November, the 1st of November. Then come along to the one that we're just going to celebrate now, which is tomorrow. And this is the last day of January, the 31st. And that's always in our Irish feasts. Then we celebrate them on the evening before, at sunset on the evening before, not on the actual day. So
Okay.
you will begin your celebrations for Imbolc tomorrow evening. And I'll tell you how to do that later on.
Please do.
And
Great.
then the third, of course, Celtic feast is Bealtaine, and that's the 1st of May. And then we have Lunasa, the 1st of August. And these are all cross-quarter days, all dedicated to 4 aspects of the goddess, because these feasts go right back to the time prehistory. And so Samhain is the time of the old woman, the crone, the cailleach. Imbolc, we're hitting into now, is the young girl, the brídóg. Bealtaine then is the woman, the fertile woman, and Lunasa then is the mother. And so Imbolc is very time also. Imbolc, it just means in the belly, which is a time of parturition, as you know. Lambs, cows are calving, and sheep are lambing, and so on. And so this is a time of new beginnings, and for us too, it's a time to really consider what we want, the new growth we want in our lives.
Fabulous.
Yes,
Yeah.
the spring, what do we want to sow, the seeds we want to sow now that will be harvested later on in our lives. And so it's also the time, of course, dedicated then to the goddess come Christian saint, Brigid. And Brigid,
So yeah, and so I come across a lot of singers that I work with, which would be some would be self-professed Christians, and some would be self-professed pagans, and some would be self-professed nothing or some other. And there's a lot of complicated feelings about that. Can you help us understand for the listeners, for sure, how you do that weave that you do so
exactly.
well?
And it's such an exciting time. And as you say, Bridget is really our role model for this because she
Yes.
spans, as you say, the pagan, the Christian. She visits every house in the world. We'd say it's certainly in Ireland. So she doesn't exclude anybody. So now at this time too of COVID, of course, that was one of the great lessons we've learned from it is our interdependence, our interconnectedness, and that everybody's belief and no beliefs are all to be respected and reverenced. And it's a very exciting time in Ireland, actually, because our institutional churches have crumbled, thankfully. And we're now on the cusp of, you can feel the excitement as people go back to what was our Celtic spirituality, not to idealise it, because there were dark periods in that too, but to learn from role models like Brigid, to go back to nature, seeing nature as our first scripture, Mother Earth, and so turning back to the divine feminine. So it's a great time for us to be together, really.
Yeah.
I think this Bridget's time is going to be very important. And of course, in 2023 VA, St. Bridget's Day is going to be a national bank holiday for the very first time ever. And so
Fabulous.
it is fabulous. That's just been a new law that's come in. And
Wow.
so, like, it's usually just, a feast day, but now it's going to be a national bank holiday.
Oh,
So very,
congratulations.
it
That's
is
fabulous.
wonderful.
Might you give us a song, Bridget?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Great.
There are, not that many songs around Bridget actually, but when we were in school, we always learned this one. And I'm taking you over to my little harmonium here now to accompany myself. And again, this is just, we praise Bridget. We praise her, the best woman, not just in Ireland, but in all the world. Wait till I see now if I'm getting, if you're getting me, if you're getting my little harmonium here as I sit down. And we will always praise her. I think you probably can see me here.
Yes, we can.
Oh,
Yes.
take you down a little bit here. Good. Okay. And so this was quite an old text, Virginia, but it's been set to a beautiful little Gregorian chant, and set in 1901 by a priest. So I intersperse the little hymn with the piece of Gregorian chant. Of course, in Ireland we call Bridget Noirin Ní Riain, which is Mary of the Irish. And so she's as important really as Mary is. There are lots of different legends around Mary and Bridget. For instance, one time Mary and the child Jesus are on their way to Jerusalem, and soldiers come out and say, "You're going nowhere. No, you're going nowhere." So Mary says, "Bridget, I need your help. Come on, Biddy." That's one of her names. And so Bridget appears, and she dons on her head a little candelabra of lighting candles. And of course, the soldiers are mesmerized, and they're looking up here at this. And while they are, Jesus and Mary slip through. And then Mary turns back to Bridget and she said, "Thank you so much, Bridget. From now on, your feast day will always be before mine." And so that means that February the 1st is the feast of St. Bridget, February the 2nd is the feast of Mary, Candlemas.
Okay, then.
Lots of lovely little stories around it. So this is Gregorian Multimedia to send us a little blessing across the airwaves, across Zoom to you all.
Oh, glorious. Glorious. You know, the interesting thing that I little bit that I know about Saint Bridget is that she was known as a keeper of the flame or a sacred fire.
And that's a
And
lovely story, actually, because in her convent, you see, Bridget was a pre-Christian goddess.
Right.
And then in the 5th century, she died, historians will tell us around 525, there was this holy woman who set up the first monastery in Kildare, Kildare. And apparently she set it up on an ancient site which was dedicated to Brigid. And not only that, but this woman actually took the name of Brigid herself. And so she's come down to us then as the Christian saint. And so in that monastery, she had, from the time of its founding, there was a perpetual fire. And so there were 20 nuns in that monastery at the time of Brigid, and every night one of the 20 nuns would tend the fire. And this fire never went out. And then when Brigid died, there were 19 nuns left in the convent, and each of them would light it every night. And on the 20th night, the nuns, they would set up the firewood and they'd say, Brigid, your turn now to keep the fire aflame. And she always did. Then right up to the time of Henry VIII, I think, it was suppressed and the fire was extinguished. But then 1994, it was reignited, and I sang the flame into existence in Kildare with the President of Ireland, Mary McAleese. So it is lighting there all the time, and indeed I actually took the flame of Brigid to Beijing, to the Women's Conference there, to the United Nations Women's Conference there.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah. So that's there. So this is a time. Also time, of course, for making your little crosses. Do you know what this cross is? A little Brigid's cross. Very ancient.
I recognize it.
Ancient symbol. And I'm even wearing it on my ear. I'm wearing one on my ear. And so here you have a very ancient symbol. Pre-Christian, of course. So representing the 4 directions and the 4 seasons. And this is where you're standing. So you're right here in the center of this. And legend has it that the holy woman Brigid, one time she was trying to convert a pagan druid, and she was telling him about what the cross was, and suddenly she took up some rushes and made them. So tomorrow we will be all making these rushes, and I teach in university, so I'll be getting my students to make these rushes, crosses, and then you put them over the door of the house, and it guarantees protection for yourself and for anybody who walks in under it, and that your house won't go up in lightning or storms or all of those awful things that you suffer over there in the States. We don't have any of those extremes here in Ireland. And then, of course, the other little tradition that you must do, VA, is you must put out your broth bride, because tradition has it that tomorrow night Brigid and her cow will pass by every house and bless it. And so she will also, if she sees a red piece of material, she will bless that. And that will have curative powers, healing powers, particularly for headaches, for the head, all the head, anything, over the coming year. But this time then next year, you must destroy it. Whereas the cross, you keep it above your door. And so it was always an ancient tradition that when you went in, you saw all of these hundreds of crosses over the door. You knew how old the house was, because you'd have a cross to represent each year. But very beautiful leave out. We really always believed that. I had an uncle who used to wear his broth bride around his waist all the year for healing, because of course she was the goddess of healing, of poetry, and of smith's craft, of fire, because the name Brigid actually means the fiery one. And she's always associated with fire, that there was fire always coming out of her house, but it never consumed the house. So loads of.
Oh, it's so great. Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing those traditions and your song, and so I just wish we would speak for hours and hours. But tell us what you're doing now. You're teaching at university, and I think you're teaching some classes maybe online, and I don't know where folks well, I know you have a website, Noirin.love, where people can find you. And what would you like to share with us before we say goodbye?
Well, as I say, one of the blessings of COVID was that part of our ministry, my ministry, I'm an interfaith, one spirit foundation minister now, but one part of it was spiritual counselling. And so I found this I never thought I'd be going down the road of it. But really, VA, I'm convinced that, apart from myself at all, that, looking after our spiritual being is very important at this time when institutions have crumbled. Thankfully, now we're back to sharing our own spiritual traditions, our own intuitions, our own imaginations around that. And, I always have to say to people who opt to come on this journey with me that this is not psychotherapy.
Right.
If I feel that it's psychotherapy that you're pursuing, I'll refer you to somebody else because, first of all, I'm not trained to, but certainly I believe that it's the spiritual counselling is the way forward. That we all have had traumatic backgrounds, some of us very serious, some of us not so serious, but really, once we have, John O'Donoghue used to talk about that, you can only scratch the wound so much. And then you have to look forward.
Yeah.
And, as Dr. Seuss would say, the great phrase of his, don't cry because it happened. Or don't cry, because it's over. Smile because it happened. And, I know it's very difficult to smile when we remember those moments, but we can't continue crying all the time. So I love sharing that with poetry, with songs, with people. That's been a lovely,
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's the grist for the mill. It's what we learn from, what do we take from it? What do we make out of it? And that's when I think of the improvisational spirit. It's like when we make a mistake, even in our musical life, what we might make of a mistake. Or what Bobby McFerrin taught me was like, make a mistake and make a good one musically, and then let's make something out of it. So how can we transform? How can we make a magic spell, as you say, to transform it, to make it into something beautiful? Because that's how we learn along the path, I think.
And you see, one of Brigid's great phrases is the happy heart is true.
Yeah.
The happy heart is true. And that's from one of a very old prayer that we have of hers from the 9th century, that was written down in the 9th century and is attributed to Brigid. And I think you know this one. Well, I'd like to give a lake of beer to God. I'd love the heavenly hosts to be tippling there for all eternity. I'd love the men of heaven to live with me, to dance and sing. If they wanted, I'd put at their disposal vats of suffering. White cups of love I'd offer with a heart and a half. Sweet pictures of mercy I'd offer to every man. Now I'd make heaven a cheerful spot. I'd make heaven a cheerful spot because the happy heart is true. The happy heart is true. I'd make the men contented for their own sake. And I'd like Jesus to love me too. I'd gather the people of heaven from all the parishes around. I'd give a special welcome to the women. VA, all the women, I'd give a special welcome to the women. The 3 Marys of great renown. I'd sit with the men, the women of God, there by the lake of beer. We'd be drinking good health forever. And every drop would be a prayer.
Oh, that's fabulous. I love it. I love it.
So,
Noreen, what a
VA,
delight. Yes.
that's my blessing for you. May every note you make, every word you speak, and your singers that are looking in, may it be a prayer.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Bless you.
Thank you so much. Blessings to you. Thank you for this time spent and words and music shared with us. We so appreciate it. Thank you, Noreen. This is VA, Vocal Journeys. Look forward to speaking with you another time. Bye-bye.